Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Irfan Hussain, and I am here with a new lecture of our course of History of English Literature. Today we are going to start the study of Medieval English Literature, that is roughly considered to be from 1066 to 1500. And our today's discussion and study will be from 1066 to Chaucer. We will end it before Chaucer. So it is the first part, that is Pre-Chaucerian period. We'll start it from the Battle of Hastings that was fought on 14th of October 1066. It was the battle when the French army invaded England and dominated Anglo-Saxon. The Battle of Hastings was fought between King Harold Godwinson, who remained king from January 6 to October 14, 1066, and his opponent was the King of Normandy, William the Conqueror, who remained king from 1066 to 1087. This is the time of the kingship of England, because he didn't leave England after winning that battle. He remained there, and this was a time when French dominated not only England but also English language, because it was the language of the rulers. So it became the language of the people with the passage of time, and the English was actually completely dominated by French. A lot of French words were added to English language, and at many places French completely replaced English. Even in present English, you will find a lot of words that were then given by French to English. For example, all the words of herd, living animals, are Saxon words like ox, cow, sheep, deer. But on the other hand, the dressed meat got words from the French masters like beef, pork, mutton, etc. This is one example. And French replaced English at many other places. The French, because they were the masters, so their literature started prevailing, and that is one example that I'm giving you. It was the best and most famous work of the time, that is known as Pu's Tapestry. It is a famous tapestry that is in an embroidered cloth nearly 70 meters long and 50 centimeters in width, in which the conqueror's wife Matilda and ladies of her court wrote the history of conquest. That is the conquest of Hastings. It was, as I told you, as it is written on the screen, our piece of cloth on which Matilda, the queen of now King Normandy, King William the Conqueror, she, along with her fellows or her ladies, embroidered all the pictures of the story of their conquest, of their victory, of the Battle of Hastings, and that got great popularity at the time, not only at that particular time but throughout the literature of France and England. French literature definitely influenced the English literature, and the most important contribution of the Normans were the mythical romances sung by the jongleurs. These were the romances, the stories that were sung by the people who used to sing in the streets and earn their livelihood. And these romances were in the form of the heroic stories. And we even now, in our culture, we find that people who wander around the streets and they sing different stories of the past. So this was that kind of practice. And these romances were long pieces, up to 50,000 lines, and were written sometimes in strophic form and sometimes in Alexandrine, but commonly in short 8 syllable rhyming couplets. What are the strophic form and what is that Alexandrine line? You will understand it if you have studied it in your other course of literary studies. And again, these are the technicalities that we may discuss in some other discussion. The most favorite hero of these romances was King Arthur, who defeated Sesmore's invaders in 12 battles. We have discussed this great King Arthur in our Anglo-Saxon literature, where we came to know about a great poem of the time, King Arthur and his Knight of Round Table. About 1143, Geoffrey of Monmouth, a Benedictine monk, lived at court of Henry I, produced in Latin a so-called Historia Britannica. Is a big name, Geoffrey of Monmouth, and he wrote a kind of history of Great Britain, and he claimed that this history was true to that time. What he told how Brutus, the great grandson of Aeneas, came to Britain and found his kingdom called after him, after his name, and a city new Troy, on site of later London. So according to him, it was Brutus who came to Britain, and he founded not only the city of London, but also he named the area, he named the region Britain on his name, Brutus. So we can say that it is a kind of tradition that tells how the name of Britain was first given to this land. And from here, there came the line of princes that was celebrated by Shakespeare, Sackville, and Milton, and so on. These were the princes like Henry and so on, who were the heroes and the characters of the great writers of the time, of the later time. There was the most important document of the 11th and the 12th century was a continuation of the Chronicles of Anglo-Saxon period. We discussed these chronicles in our Anglo-Saxon history, and this was the time when these Anglo-Saxon chronicles sustained English language to some extent. It was the time when English was completely dominated by French, and there was no there was no literature being produced in English language. But these Anglo-Saxon chronicles, the continuation of these Anglo-Saxon chronicles, gave a kind of life to English language in that period of that time. Chronicles of Peterborough started in 1121 and abruptly ended in 1154 with the death of King Stephen. These were very important chronicles, and these were you can say, the last ray of English language. And King Stephen was a kind king who allowed these kind of activities and Peterborough's chronicles. But then what happens when he died? Then Peterborough received a new and stern Norman abbot named Gerald. He was a kind of person who didn't allow him to continue these chronicles. So one more chapter of English literature closed there. With the discontinuation of chronicles, English prose ended, and the history of the preceding century was recorded in Latin, partly written by English and partly by the Norman descent. Earliest of them were Aureus Vitalis, Seymour of Durban, Henry Partington, and William of Malmesbury, last of them in Matthew of Westminster, French, in his work in 1273. These were the works that were written in French or Latin language. There was a very little share of English language in these works. After 1200, English came in use for writing, mostly in translation, paraphrasing, and imitation of French work. This is a tradition. When a language is weak, when the literature of some language is weak, then it starts literature by reproducing the literature of other languages. So because English was weak then, there were no great writers in English language, so they started their literature by translating French literature. Later they also translated Italian, and that was the beginning of English writing. As we can see now in our country that dramas are being translated from other languages, novels and writings of other languages are being translated into Urdu. This is why, because we are not producing good literature in our own language and we have to borrow from others. Few other examples were the religious writings like the Gospels, and these Gospels because of their religion that had their importance, and they formed a function of sustaining the language in that time. There were other few poems that were having the religious background, like Seven Joys of Virgin, Five Holy Wounds of Christ, 11 Pains of Hell, Seven Deadly Sins, dialogue between body and soul, a love counsel by Friar Tom Stevens, the Owl and the Nightingale in the reign of Henry III. It was written, and that is one very important poem of the time. And all these poems that we just discussed, these are very important, and you may be asked about these poems in some written tests, even in Publishers Commission. I remember that few of these names were given in Publishers Commission for their period to be asked. There was another monk, Robert, the monk of Gloucester, from 1260 to 1300. He was the only from the vernacular metrical chronicle of English history that bears his name. We know his name, that he is known by his own name, and with his writing. About 1300 he composed a chronicle in English verse. So there were a few examples that were written in pure English language at that time. Few other examples now, because English is getting revival, so we have these few examples here, like Ancient Revival, Rival, Rule of and Crosses, the Handling Scene, Cursor Mandi. Cursor Mandi is one of the very important and famous work of the time. Prick of Conscience, and the Handbait of Empire, the Remorse of Conscience. These were written in 1340. And this was the year when our great Chaucer was born. So this is all the discussion till Chaucer, and one more important work, and that is known to be M.S. Harley 2253, 2253. This is actually one of the most important, rather the most important collection of English works before Chaucer. It was a collection of religious, secular love poems, delicate lyrics, satire, comedies, debates, interludes, eclectic sayings, conduct literature, Bible stories, dream interpretations, and pilgrim guides. It was one of the great collections of the time. Rather, it was the most famous collection of the time before Chaucer, and it had great appeal. Before that work, there was no such collection. There was no such collection found in English language history. So this is till Chaucer. I hope that you have understood There are a lot of other things, but I tried to pick up the most important things that could be presented in this lecture. And I tried that before going to Chaucer, we should cover the gap between the Anglo-Saxon and Chaucer so that we can go in a stream, we can go without any discontinuity. Our next video will be about great Geoffrey Chaucer, who gave revival to English language and is known to be father of English language. Till then, stay home, stay safe. Thank you very much. God bless you.